and Kenny. We have another special guest today, in-house, internal, director of operations, Mr. Jason Jenkins, a.k.a. Cannonball. We're going to go into exactly your history and all that, but you know what? I was going to ask him to explain the Cannonball thing, but I think, I say we go into. I say we.
Do we
wait.
get there organically?
Yeah.
Is that where, okay.
Yeah. I wait till we get there, and then we'll go ahead and deep dive into that.
We'll just cliffhanger right at the top. Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. So,
all right.
Cannonball. Can you just kind of start off with the history, where you started off in the beginning, and how it led to this?
In the beginning, there was the Cannonball.
Back in the beginning.
Yeah, and then just kind of lead us a little bit into where you're at right now.
Okay.
So,
well, I grew up in Ohio, from a small little corn town.
I'm sorry for that.
Me too. Trust me. Born and raised Ohio State, and don't care if anybody is the hater. This hasn't been my season, so I'm not going to really talk about that. No, I went to school, college for theater design. Theater technology and design, and kind of found it by accident. I actually enrolled in school for pre-law and started school as going to be on track for a lawyer. And I figured out real quick there was way too much reading and way too much library time. So after scanning the course offerings, I found theater design. I'm like, oh, why not? I did theater stuff in school.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Was high school? Was that anything?
Orchestra, music, band, that kind of stuff. I played in the theater stuff, but didn't really do a whole lot with it. Had no idea what I was getting into, and through that, kind of found this industry after about 4 years of working through that. I have a lighting specialty. That's where I focused, learning about physical lighting. Probably much like you did with the whole. I started mostly in dance, is where they put me, because it was you didn't have to really see faces when you dance, so it's really
look at all the pretty colors.
Exactly, it's it's greens and blues and
a lot of torm lighting,
yes,
and portal lighting,
torms, ladders, sides, all kinds of cool stuff. But to get into this portion of the industry. We had an internship program our senior year, and I did an internship with Bandit Lights. They had never had anybody.
Shout out Jake Tickle.
Yeah, Jake Tickle, Mike Golden. I mean, I could come up with tons of names. But to organically shift into where Cannonball came from, which will come shortly, that comes from Mike Golden and Bandit Lights. But did an internship, came down to Nashville from Ohio, worked in the shop for a while. Didn't really work out there.
What year is this for you?
This was circa 299.
Okay.
Yeah. 99.
That's before you got in here. Because every time I hear something, it's like you're the first
Listen,
one here.
He was there for the flood. I was there for the Last Supper.
It's finally somebody's there before Kenny got there. Right.
Yes, I was here before Kenny. As much as Kenny likes to talk about, he's been here forever.
Yeah, he was here a lot longer. They were still using lanterns to light stages then.
Candlelight.
But yeah, moved down here, kind of corn boy out of Ohio, moved to Nashville. The internship went really well, met a lot of people. Bandit did offer me a job at that point in time. Didn't really pan out at that moment. Went back to Ohio, started running a venue, started working for a Promo West Pavilion, a company up there that does they're now called the LC Pavilion or something like that. But running that venue as far as doing lighting for all the bands and whatnot. And then kind of out of the blue, about a year and a half, maybe 2 years into that, I get a call from Mike Golden. And it's like, hey, I got this band. I don't know if you ever heard of them. They're called Seether. And they really need a lighting guy. It's like, you want to come meet them? And I'm like, all right, cool, why not? So traveled down to, I think we actually met in Louisville. Mike drove up from Nashville. I drove down, and we met the guys. And
had you actually heard Seether before that?
Once he told me who it was, sure, yeah. I'd never heard of the band at that moment in time.
Right. In that moment, they became the greatest band.
Right.
Well, yeah, because it was like, hey, an opportunity to be a touring lighting guy, and I've never done it before. Sure, why not? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I got to design it. I got to pick everything, and it was actually that was their freshman album, the Freshman States album.
Yeah, because that would have been right after they they came to the States, right? Because they
Yeah.
were no longer sarin gas.
Yeah,
at
it was
that
just, it was
point.
sarin gas, and they had and drummer Nick had been
Yep.
pulled out, and that tour was with Trapped, and it was a co-headliner with Seether and Trapped, and I designed Seether, and started touring then. Jumped around from band to band for a while. Went from them, worked with Twisted, worked with I know, back the ICP Insane Clown Posse stuff, and jumped from them, went to Hoobastank, toured with them for a while, jumped out of the touring stuff and moved to Nashville. And then Bandit just kind of utilized me as a contractor for, like they do with a lot of people.
So you were still back home kind of during that
original
touring
stint? the first cycle, the first few bands I worked with Seether, Twisted, and ICP, I was still based out of Ohio.
Okay.
And then moved here after I finished Hoobastank. And
what year was that you actually made the move?
2004.
Okay.
Yeah, I moved to Nashville in 2004. And started working basically full-time in the shop at Bandit and doing events. They started me off on, like, I think where everybody starts with Toby Keith at that moment in time.
Garth or Toby.
Yeah, exactly. It was Garth or Toby. I did Toby for a couple cycles. And
you were strictly doing lighting.
Yes. Yeah, I was only working in the lighting space and pretty much as a technician at that point. While I was on Toby, I met Terry Clark, and her production team offered me my first, like, I guess, country tour LD, and I worked for Terry I took that gig and worked for her for probably 3 or 4 years, give or take. And after that was actually a great cycle. She was a great artist to work for. Jumped from there, started doing I did a worldwide tour with the Osmonds. Again through Bandit, then found my way into the CCM world and started doing some stuff with Stephen Curtis Chapman, Mandisa, Brandon Heath, Britt. I can't remember. I'm gonna be honest.
You did Third
Britt
Day.
something.
You did Third Day.
Third Day.
Right?
Yeah, Third Day was kind of my last stint.
Because how many of the same people? Was it just two? You and I worked for two.
It was
of the
Third
same
Day.
People?
It was
we both
Third
done
Day.
Seether. We both done Third Day.
I think that. Yeah, I
be
think
it.
those are the only two.
So you guys had met before you actually.
Yeah,
started.
we met working for Scott Moore.
Yeah,
from Go Live
in 2012, 2011, maybe.
That sounds about right.
Somewhere in there. It was somewhere between 11 and 13 would have been when we first met. Because I think it was the first thing you and I did together was prep. The first time they did the K-Love Awards.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like
the first K-Love at the Ryman.
At the Ryman.
Yep.
Where we stuffed like 65 bands on a stage the size of a pickup truck.
This room. Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, that's where he and I first met, and then we kind of crossed paths on bands a little bit. Like I said, I was Seether's first. I can claim the fame that I was Seether's first LD. I was the first one.
And then I was their best. So.
I mean,
or their never mind. Yeah. I can't say the last because obviously that's not the case. And then so I started working for. Got to make sure I keep my track right here. Did Terry Clark for a long while, then went to the Osmonds, and then I took a gig with Theatrical Lighting Systems, TLS, out of Huntsville, long before they sold off to Four Wall, which is now Four Wall. I ran their Nashville shop for a couple years, while I was also working for Rodney Atkins at that point as well as his LD, and then ultimately when Rodney kind of slowed down, TLS sold off to Four Wall. I was poised to open the Four Wall Nashville shop, but through a lot of politics and whatnot, ended up leaving Four Wall at that point in time and kind of went back on the road and was like, oh no, what am I going to do? What am I going to do?
Well, I think that acquisition was that was around 2011 because I think
so. Yeah,
that's when you and I met. We prepped in that Four Wall shop.
We
prepped,
prepped
it was like brand new.
Did we prep K-Love?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we did.
Yeah, as I recall. Yeah. Right.
No, we prepped Third Day there because I want to say
yes.
Lighting actually came from Elite for a decent portion of K-Love because it was a Peter Strife.
Yeah, that's right. You are correct.
Yeah. I think we did because you and I ended up doing everything that nobody else wanted to do on that thing. There was like a bunch of like really quick changeovers. So they had this high speed. They had a video wall and high speed motors downstage. So it would like fly in real fast, and then they would close the curtain, and we would go from candelabras and pianos, and you had a 30-second video to get rid of a grand piano, a stage full of candelabras, and then hang like 35 mirror balls.
Yeah.
And you just did it real fast, and then it would fly out, curtain would open, they'd do the song, and then it'd close again, and then you're striking 35 mirror balls and doing
trying
else.
Trying not to break them. And it was fast too. Like it wasn't.
It was no exaggeration. It was 35 to 45 seconds is what you had. Yeah.
And if I recall, that was on a line set that just came down, and we just had all these little wires just hanging over, and just like clip, 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 go as fast as you could, and then dive behind the set so you weren't seeing when everything went.
So those first couple of times must have been a nightmare. I'm sure you got it down packed after.
Well, it was a
one-off show.
It was a one-off show, so it was, and every time was different. It was a different gag every time, and I don't know that we rehearsed it.
We didn't. I think we talked about it. And I think Scott wanted to do a rehearsal, but they didn't allow for it in the production schedule. So
and it was really during that song. It was talking about, okay, so the next thing we got to do. This might be the best way to do it. We'll find out.
Right.
And then we just do it.
Just do it. Yeah. A lot of that. It's a lot of that.
Yeah. And so after I left Four Wall, kind of went back into the freelance world a little bit, and did a few things for Scott. And then I jumped on Premier Global, called me up and gave me a job with Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull. And I crew chiefed that for a season. And then went from that to One Republic for Chris Lyle. And so I crew chiefed One Republic there. I don't remember which tour that was. Native tour in 2000, and I want to say it was 12 or 13. Yeah, I think it was 13 actually. Yeah. And after that, that's when I went to Third Day and LD Third Day for what was my final tour. After that tour, during that tour, during that whole cycle, my last season there in 13 was when I started talking to Elite. And the conversation started with Peter Strife at that moment in time. And we did several video interviews, and I didn't know Peter at the time. I knew of him through the K-Love thing, but I didn't know him personally. And we talked, and that was back in the first days of Skype and all that kind of stuff, and like sitting in California. Exactly. Like, do you know what
Buffering. Yeah.
And then through conversations with Peter, conversations with Tom Wilson, I thought the gig disappeared, honestly. And I was still touring with Third Day at the time. And everything kind of went dead silent for a while. And then I got a call from the then CEO, Monty Raines. And he was like, "Hey, would you like to come in and work for us full time as the lighting department head?" I was like, "Sure, why not?"
And that would have been, that was kind of Elite's infancy in Nashville.
It was, yeah, because we had, I want to say we had maybe 11 people on staff, maybe.
And they had just moved here from Memphis, right?
Yeah, the shop had just moved here, and they had just prepped.
I feel like K-Love was one of those first things that they had done when they were in town.
They'd moved to Elite had moved to Nashville in late 13. It might have been early 13 because they had prepped Luke Bryan in that was the first job they prepped in the new shop, because there were crates of new gear and all kinds of stuff and very infant process and whatnot. But yeah, I came on to run. They'd had a bit of a falling out with somebody. An employee who left, and so I came in and took over as the lighting department head and kind of helped them get in line and get things cleaned up and start getting processes and stuff that go along with departments. Stuff that I'd learned working from TLS and Four Wall and whatnot, and then through trial and error and maybe just inserting myself in certain places, ultimately Monty asked me to be the director of operations, and so I've been director of operations since.
He had hair when he started that position.
Yes, and no gray at all. Like
nice.
He had these long, flowing, gorgeous locks when we first met.
Did he really?
No. Dude, I haven't had hair since 2002. to be
Yeah?
perfectly
O2?
honest. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. Okay. So walk us through. Just rewind a little bit. So did you want to have? Because you were doing some freelance stuff before you actually accepted the position. Did you think about actually wanting to settle down and stop the touring a little bit, or just something different, or what was that? What was that transition like?
As any road guy will tell you, and road guy at that moment in time, because obviously there weren't as many females in the industry. It's kind of damn near impossible to actually have a real relationship. And if you can, you consider yourself pretty much an outlier.
You're lying, really.
Basically, yeah.
If you have a good relationship while you're touring 200 shows a year, you're someone's not telling the truth.
Yeah.
Well, and I always told myself if I ever got to the feeling of where I was dreading getting on a bus, that was when I needed to rethink things, because that life it's different now, but at that point in time, it's really like you really got to want to do it.
Yeah.
And as I've heard you comment before, it's very much like the closest thing to being a pirate that still exists in life.
Yeah.
Is like no real home, just living on the bus, and the ship just goes wherever. Well, I really started feeling during that the One Republic tour was a really difficult tour for me. Not in operation or anything. It was just we were gone for 3 months straight. I didn't see my house. Met some great friends and had a lot of cool experiences, but it was just really, really hard. And I got to the end of that and I'm just like, I'm not sure how I'm feeling. And then I went and did
enjoying this anymore.
Not enjoying it as much as I used to now.
Yeah.
And I did the third day thing, and the third day tour was great because it was very much the weekend warrior thing. So you got to come in and go out, and that was a little bit better, but it still just didn't feel right. And when that opportunity came along to kind of take a step back and still be heavily involved in an industry that I dearly love, I was able to kind of parlay that over into that. And so stepped off the bus and stepped into the office.
What was that transition like for you? I mean,
it was
hard. It's a thing that we kind of, I think, bring up with everybody, and
it was really hard because as you know, like you just get used to basically doing whatever you want to at any given time, and
weirdly on a schedule. You get to do whatever you want to on a schedule because breakfast is up at 7, lunch is up at noon, dinner's at 5. Like
you got time for a nap from 2 to 4.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, so. Changing into an office schedule was definitely a bit difficult, but as we started building the crew at Elite and how things were operating, we kind of gave a lot of freedom as far as how that functioned. And for me, it was very weird coming in at like 9 o'clock in the morning and leaving at I won't even say 5 because the core group of us we were easily working from 8 or 9 a.m. to 8 or 9 p.m. on a pretty regular. I remember Chaz Hassler and Harry Schaub and I, we were the 3 department heads. I was the first one, and then we brought in Chaz from. He was working at iMag Video at the time. He came over and took over our LED department, and then we brought in Harry Schaub to run the audio department. And the 3 of us were, we were the Wild West. And our office in the warehouse, the cubicles that we had in this concrete dungeon of a warehouse, and then my office was this concrete block room that was just absolutely scary and horrible. It's where somebody was killed in there. That's all I was saying. I don't know what happened in there, but something bad happened.
Something devious happened there.
But yeah, like blaring crazy music till all hours of the night, and that was us transitioning road work into an office environment, because we were still doing anybody will tell you on the road, you're working from 7 a.m. Even though you have a chance to take a nap usually or whatever, you're 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. is that's pretty regular. 6 a.m. 2 a.m. is a pretty regular basis type thing. And that really started wearing on me as well. So we started pushing really hard and like let's get a work-life balance going on, and let's take road work. Let's do the kind of stuff we do and we know and we love, but let's do it in an environment that's actually good for our mental health and good for us as a whole.
You can keep that kind of schedule when you're only doing it every other day or every 2 days with a day off. Trying to do that 5 days a week is
and at that point in time, with only a 10 to 12 person staff, and even then that was front office too. That wasn't even full warehouse staff. Like the warehouse staff was only about 5 or 6 people total.
Wow.
So we were doing everything, and we were working 7 days a week easily. Like I think the occasional Sunday off, but being in all day on a Saturday was not unheard of. So we were killing hours for a very long time. And then on top of that, I was traveling a fair bit, going out to artists, going out. I mean, I was doing those hours and then traveling. So it became a bit of a strain. So I became a big proponent for that work-life balance and like family time, work time.
Yeah.
Those kind of things.
How long were you in the shop? I guess, how long did you have that role as far as head of lighting before you transitioned into being director of ops?
I think it was only about a year,
okay.
if I recall. It might be a little bit longer than that, but I think about a year. And then, again, it was kind of
because I feel like Elite had a growth spurt kind of after that first or second year.
Well, I started pushing at that point in time for like the LDI trips and developing things, and not just going out and like actually going out and having presence and starting to share the Elite brand. That was my first year. That was a big push for me, and I kind of took that role of head of ops or director of ops at that point in time to kind of continue that push and let the department still function and be able to operate whilst continuing to like use my connections. And what I will say, I'd like to say that I have a pretty decent reputation in the industry. Some may argue that, I don't know, but
I would.
But using the connections that we have to continue that brand and expand the brand, which I think we've done a pretty decent job. Again, I'm coming up on this. This is actually my 10th year with Elite.
You got what, March?
February 14th. February 14th is my. Yeah.
If there's another reason to not like Valentine's Day, it's CB's been here 10 years.
So then that transition wasn't even that bad for you because, based on your experience, like the crew chief and the lighting stuff, like you were already pretty much like in tune with like, I don't want to say calling the shots, but at least like managing people.
Driving crews, absolutely. Because being a crew chief is the same thing as being a manager. It really is. And there's good managers and there's bad managers. We've all experienced both.
Definitely. So that was an easy transition for you.
It was.
Right? Coming to that.
It was. It was really the only thing that changed besides the fact was and I won't even say the schedule is what changed. It was really just more the fact that there was a little bit more corporate office, and I wouldn't even want to say corporate's even the wrong word because this company is not exactly a corporate type style company, but the operations and the I'm trying to think of the right word here.
It's a little more. The guide rails are a little tighter.
It's an office structure.
Yeah.
I mean, really, what it comes down to, and not by any negative in any sense of the term. It's just different. Like out on the road, it's the same exact thing, only just there's a whole lot more F-bombs. There's a whole lot more
you got to learn
debauchery. Exactly. HR.
Yeah. Well, there is an HR department now. Like before, the only HR department on the road is the one guy that nobody likes, like that tattletales on people. Like that's the only HR department.
That's just looking out. See who you can
there really
snitch
is
on.
one now, so you have to like make sure that you're watching your P's and Q's.
Yeah, definitely. So tell me your influences on music before that. I know you worked with you started off with some rock stuff, right? Is that something you were into before? Because I know the Nashville stuff is very. There's a lot of I don't want to say gospel. What's the right word for that?
Well, it's a lot of CCM. I mean, Nashville specifically, I'd say it's a mix of country and CCM. Those are kind of the two things that are prevalent here.
Right. So either one. Was that something that you were listening to before?
I was nowhere close to anything in country, CCM, anything. I was pretty much a rock. I'm a kid of the '90s, so very much the Seattle grunge.
Yeah.
I mean, I was the kid in high school where I grew up in Ohio, 4 feet of snow, walking to school 2 miles in my cutoff jean shorts, combat boots, and a cutoff flannel.
With the Walkman.
Dude,
press my tape.
Absolutely.
You rewind that.
Smashing pumpkins, screaming trees, like that kind of stuff. That was very much my world. I was nowhere close to, like, country was very foreign to me. CCM was even more foreign. I had no exposure to CCM before I started working in that genre.
Well, that's funny. I mean, talking with, I figure this podcast will come out after the one with JL, but having that conversation with JL, I think he would have a very interesting perspective because JL started in the CCM industry when I would say that it was, like I said, it was in its pinnacle where there was actually some cool stuff going on.
The golden age.
Yeah.
And then you kind of moved in at that period of time where it was like everything sounds exactly the same.
Yeah. Every artist was exactly the same for the most part. It's honestly why I loved Third Day so much because they've got such a southern rock vibe. It was
like the
still
Christian Leonard Skynyrd.
Absolutely, and it was, and they were, and those guys are all great. I mean, I still talk to a few of them every now and again. I mean, I still see Mac at church every once in a while, the lead singer, and he's just a cool. It was a much different vibe. So the rock world is where I come from. Absolutely. Never did a lot of rock touring besides with Seether and Hoobastank. And Hoobastank's a little bit of a shift there because it's the kind of that rock pop thing. But But that was pretty much where I came from. Yeah.
So on your whole, because that's a pretty long, it's like decade or so, a little bit more than that. And what have you seen in the touring industry that has changed? I know pretty much things still stay the same, but in your perspective, what have you seen like major changes?
Well, so in the life, I will openly say that when I started touring, it was probably, and Kenny would probably agree, it was the decline of the debauchery.
Yeah.
The decline of the partying.
It started to become a little more corporate.
Yeah. Everybody thinks that touring is like, oh, it's a big party and there's everything everywhere and this, that, the other. And for me, while it started that way, because I mean, I've had my fair bit of alcohol tabs and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I have partied with rock stars. And
but
all
what
that
you
kind of
picture
stuff.
when you hear,
yeah, exactly. The memes that you see of what it was like, that happened. But for me, it's really started. That was started to go in the downward, like towards a more corporate. And I don't even want to say corporate as much as just a much more relaxed, a much more.
Well, people had
calm.
Well, and there was.
We grew up.
Well, and people started
That's
really.
a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Well, there was money on the line, right? Like people. It became an investment for people. So they
had a mortgage. You had a mortgage to pay.
Well, and not even that. Just like on the management side, on this other thing,
there's more on the line.
There's more on the line, and so if you were the guy that was going to go on a bender right before, the night before loading, you weren't going to get a gig anymore.
No,
because you were a bad investment. Like people wanted to protect their money, and so I think that was the real big shift. Was just more and more people started getting money in it. There was more on the line. Long gone were the days of Almost Famous.
Yeah,
where it's just anybody can get on the bus and we'll just go.
Well, and I can remember a specific incident that I don't talk about a whole lot that I'm not afraid to, because a lot of people have heard the story. But when I worked for Hoobastank, which was I think my third tour at that moment in time, and I haven't even told the Cannonball story, which we can talk about that in a minute. But I was a much bigger guy. I was just shy of 400 pounds, and we went out partying one night with the band, and I remember it was the beginning of Red Bull. It was like Red Bull had just came out, and nobody knew anything about how horrible it was or all the crap that was in it or anything like that. So Red Bull and vodka was everywhere, and that's all I was drinking with.
Nobody had a heart attack yet while doing that?
No. And I pride myself on being like reliable when it came to being on tour. I never missed a load in. Well, I got oil spotted and missed a bus call one night, and actually like woke up with heart palpitations because I'd been drinking Red Bull and vodka all night long. Yeah. Didn't know how I got back to the room. It was a bad thing, and I got to the venue. I made it to load in, but I felt like absolute garbage all day long, and it was really like that with those heart palpitations when I'm like this got to change. Like life has to be better at this point in time, and like you said, there's stuff on the line at this point. And so you realize you have those moments where it's like, okay, great, this is all a fun party, but not at what cost?
At what cost, exactly. All right, now you got to dive into the Cannonball story.
So the Cannonball thing, I guess I glazed over it. So going back to when I was running venue and I got that phone call from Mike Golden at Bandit.
Just so everybody knows real quick, we all call you Cannonball.
Yes.
Obviously, except the CEO.
Yeah, I think Angela's the only one that calls him
Angela,
Jason.
Amanda.
It still throws me.
They call him? It's like Jason's like, Cannonball.
Have you talked to Jason? I'm like, who is Jason?
You have a Jason here?
Jason?
Is that a new hire?
I even say it when I hear Jason, I'm like, I don't even respond to it half the time.
Right, because you're so used to it now.
Yeah,
so I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
But no, it's while I was on tour with Seether, Jonathan Pounds, who was, I guess he was doing marketing and a handful of other things at Bandit, came out to, and he liked the band, so he just came out, and he kept calling me Cannonball. I'm like, fuck's Cannonball? I don't know who Cannonball. What are you talking about? And so, if you know Sean Morgan from Seether, if something bothers you, he'll find it. And he will dig on it and dig on it, and he'll poke at it. And I didn't like it at first. I'm like, what is this Cannonball thing? I don't understand. He wrote it on my laundry bag. I mean, I got a custom backstage pass that said Cannonball on it. And he just dug into it. Finally, I get to Bandit after I'd finished that tour, and I'm like, what is this Cannonball thing? And so the story is that after I left and went back to Ohio, there was a staff meeting at Bandit, and the Seether was on the plate, and there's like, we can't send any of our guys. Nobody's available. Do you remember that big guy, the big guy, bald head? He looked like a cannonball.
Was this Mike Golden?
This was Mike Golden. At least this is the story that's been repeated to me, and that's when I guess it stuck with their crew, and then. If you can't beat them, join them. So I basically decided at that point in time, like, screw this. Well, I'll just you can't beat me up. You can't beat me up.
Yeah, exactly.
Take away the power. So I became Cannonball.
Actually, it could have been way worse.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you get a nickname on the road.
I was going to say, that's the culture of how you get a nickname on the road, I would imagine.
I mean, yeah.
That, I think, or you do something. And
you do something really dumb.
Yeah.
You do something really dumb. Yep. If your nickname is Sparky, we all make assumptions about what happened.
Skid marks or something like that. All right, so now what has changed in the industry as you've seen, like, technical stuff? So, like,
everything
as far as like touring goes. Well, obviously, like, besides the technology things that obviously forward progression.
Mm-hmm. Well, I told you started out with lanterns, so we don't use oil-filled lamps anymore.
Well, that's a big change right there, man.
Old carbon arcs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I honestly, part of me feels bad for these young whippersnappers that have not had to call spots with carbon arcs.
Hey, I got to back out. I got to change my rods.
I mean, granted, I've only done it a handful of times, and it was older venues, mostly in the Northeast, but I feel like it's a rite of passage. Well, or at least it was.
Well, what it is like now, like, take somebody from your experience, your guys' experience that have worked with like minimal things at this point. There's so many different things now. I'm sure when you see somebody do things and I can't do this. Can you help me? You're just looking at them like, dude, like.
Oh, I feel like the old guy all the time when I go back to the shop and start talking about something, and
they have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, we were talking about. I think it was focusing on 180K.
Oh,
rigs.
wow, yeah.
And Welke goes, "Oh, I'm glad I wasn't doing this then. I wouldn't have been in this industry." And it's like, well, that's just what you did.
Yeah, these kids. I can say these kids. Good Lord. Yeah, they don't understand. I mean, like 120K, 180K. Parcan rig was standard back in those days.
Especially at a festival.
Exactly. You didn't get these custom moving light rigs because the tech wasn't there. Like literally the kind of tours I was doing was 4 and 6 moving lights and a Parcan rig, and that stuff that's historical. But yeah, you had to sit there and you had to call. You had to get the climber to go up into these rigs and like, I got to focus up, down, left, right, to spin the bottle. It's all these things, and. No, these kids where you're driving consoles and just driving all focus.
It was more labor heavy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, I mean, and there was, in its simplicity, there was still a fair amount of knowledge you had to have.
Oh, yeah.
We were, I mean, because at that point everything was a demo rack, and so there was a lot more kind of, I guess, kind of raw knowledge that you had to have.
Well, and I think that's where a little bit of my background with going to school for lighting kind of helped me, because I was concerned about how the body was being lit. It wasn't just put a light here. It was literally like, okay, I'm gonna put my arms out. I need the coverage to be here, going over to here, and I know I'm moving away from the mic. Sorry.
No, you're good.
But yeah, it's like you really kind of had to have knowledge of what the product was, versus now it's a little bit different. The knowledge base has changed. the expectation of knowledge has changed. Like now, you do need to be basically daggum a computer programmer.
Well, yeah, you got to be a network guy.
Engineer. I mean, you need to know about IP addresses and subnets and gateways and all this kind of stuff that we didn't have to do. Nothing to do with that. Like when I was first told when an MA came out and it's like, hey, does it have a heartbeat? I'm like,
wait, what? It's alive?
What heartbeat? What are you talking about? I don't know.
Remember when the USB was an add-on?
Oh,
the
dude.
MA1?
So
it was like an aftermarket like add-on that you could wire in a USB so you could use a thumb drive because it was a floppy drive.
Floppy drives. 3.5 floppies. And I remember getting my first laptop. I didn't have a laptop on Seether. I got my first laptop that I actually toured with on my second tour with Twisted, and I got an external USB floppy drive so that I could back up my shows.
That's insane.
It was crazy, dude. Yeah.
Floppy days, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Jeez.
Now the expectation of technology has changed. That's probably the biggest thing. Is just what you need to know and how technical the insides of the guts of the fixtures and all the gear is now.
Yeah.
It's just so much more technical than it used to be. As far as, I mean, we used to work on lights consistently on the road. It's not as prevalent as it used to be, but it was very simple because you just had a sensor and you just had sensors and little motors, and it was very easy to kind of track down what was going wrong. Mm-hmm. It's a lot more now than it ever used to be.
More components now.
Very much so.
Well, yeah, it was much more mechanical at that point.
Yeah.
You know, there was a circuit board, driving, a logic controller driving stuff, but it was mostly mechanical. It was like if this doesn't work, well, the motor clunked out or whatever.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's so much more now.
Well, I think the most technical thing I think I ever had to do on fixing lights was like just thinking back to the VL3K, back just taking that logic board out of the if something went wrong, if a driver chip went bad, you just took the board out and you put another board in, or you just took a driver chip out and you put another driver chip in. That was it. Yep. That was as technical as you got.
Good old days. Super simple back then.
Oh, dude, I can take a VL 2500 apart. with my eyes closed.
Absolutely.
So technically, anybody could have came on and kind of replaced anybody from the tour. Like, it didn't have to have as much.
Yes
knowledge.
and no.
The learning curve would be way shorter.
Well,
within a couple of weeks, the guy would be ready to go.
I think there's some. Well, that's why I was making the comment. I think there was some like base knowledge there. Like, you really had to know electrical stuff at that point. Like, it's funny. We sent a guy out honestly, we sent him out as the crew chief and the lighting director. And I had to show him how to tie in a PD because that was just something he had never done. Like, that wasn't just part of it. He was great behind a console. He was great messing with lights, all that stuff. But he didn't have a lot of exposure to that because 9 times out of 10, that wasn't something he wasn't something he was doing. That was somebody else's gig. So for us, it was we had to be everybody. You were your moving light tech. You were running the show. You were your electrician.
Yeah, you had one guy. You didn't have a crew. I mean, there was a crew, but there was a guitar tech. There was maybe a production manager if you were lucky, but usually the production manager was usually an audio guy too. So it was a front of house audio guy, a monitor guy, and a lighting guy. I mean, it was pretty average to have a 4-man crew, and that's all you had.
But there was a lot of like kind of electrical theory that I think was required. Okay. Early on, because that was the basis of everything. Yeah. Because you were using dimmer racks, and so what happens if you drop a leg? What does dropping a leg look like? Yeah. Kind of all these things. So, could you, if they have that base knowledge, could you throw somebody else on the show? Yeah.
Yeah. But
I think it was a lot more. Not technical knowledge, but there was still a lot more kind of like, honestly, blue collar skill, trade skill was really what it was. Okay. You needed to know the basis of electrical theory. You needed to know the basics of
mechanical. I mean, there was you were going to get tasked with some weird stuff.
Yeah, there was a lot of one-man bands. Yeah, just everybody doing it. Now it's just a little bit more.
You were the tech guy. So the expectation is if you didn't play an instrument, you need to know how to do everything else.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Okay. So that's one of the things that has changed.
It's much more specialized, and I think that's the advancement of the technology, right? Like it's weird because now, like, one of the things that we're doing in-house is we're using the same type of network switches between all the departments because it's a specialized network switch that you can run video over and all this stuff. And so the departments started to become more and more integrated as far as tech. Right. And then with that, you became more and more specialized in each department. And so I think that's even been a change in the last 4 or 5 years,
honestly,
watching that happen.
I'd say it might even be a little bit less than that. I mean, networking, it's been kind of the plug and play, but we're really getting in the last 2 or 3 years, honestly, in the worlds of Pathport and Luminex and a handful of those things that it's really like you really do need to know a whole lot
Video
more.
guys and lighting guys are much more integrated now.
And it used to be everybody separate. Like there was no integration. Now we're integrating intercom over IP between all departments and all locations. I mean, I just went out and visited the Luke Bryan crew in their last show not too long ago, and it was the first time I'd experienced full integration of an entire crew on comm, and like everybody could talk to everybody and everybody could isolate out everybody else. So the lighting crew wasn't talking to the video crew, but then they could press one button and switch over, and everybody it was really cool to see this culmination of technology and like, oh wow, everybody can talk now, instead of having to get on a radio and hope to God somebody could hear you live during the show.
Well, it's interesting because like comm specifically, we've been doing that in broadcast for a long time, but it was not feasible in the live world.
No, not at all.
Because the back end was so much. It was far more complicated, and so if it was a permanent install, it's a lot easier to have key panels, and so director can talk to each camera or can talk to wherever. And so you're right. It's interesting to see now some of the stuff that we were doing in broadcast now starting to creep into.
Well, and I think that's historically true of live events as a whole. Everything starts in broadcast. Almost everything originates there and then tracks its way down somehow. And I'm actually really like just talking about comm to geek out for a moment. I think one of the cool things now that we're going to be able to integrate is with this whole comm over IP stuff that's been happening, we're going to be able to integrate our local shop, our tech team here, like when they have issues on the road, they're going to be able to comm in on job sites.
Yeah,
yes.
so you'll be here talking to somebody in Billings, Montana. I know that's his favorite place.
We've been talking about Billings a whole lot lately, but yeah, one of our lighting department head will be able to hop on intercom live during a show, and if they're having a problem or something, and actually remote in and talk to the guys and talk to the systems and be able to figure out if there's something going wrong, what's going wrong.
That's ridiculous. I mean, that changes the game pretty much.
Which again is funny because like that is a thing that was happening in broadcast in the early mid 2000s. That was a thing that was already happening in broadcast. There were things that you could integrate. Clearcom had like a add-on package that you could plug a phone into and then hook it to your Clearcom.
via DSL modems, and it was 2-line DSL modems to get it to sound like this, to sound halfway decent. And it was radio tech. Mm-hmm. It was radio broadcast technology being integrated into at that point in time.
Because if you were if you were on a TV truck, you could call, like, I remember specifically, we were bouncing between broadcasts in Florida and broadcasts in California, and so they were both live broadcasts. So the studio in California was talking to the studio in Florida, and that way we could coordinate the handover. But it was literally, we had to do it via comm. So there was a phone line connecting the two comms so the control rooms could talk to each other live. And so they were listening to the director count down going out, and then they were counting in, taking it live in California. So, I mean, that was 14 years ago. So, it's interesting to see that technology move into this space.
Right. I mean, you saying that, I'm like, wait, that wasn't there before, but, you know.
The internet has changed the world, my friend.
I see that. That's crazy. That's insane.
It's that back end. Yeah. It's how much was required on the back end, just not even expense, but just size in some cases, physical size, and the complexity. Like, you don't want to have to troubleshoot that much gear and connection points on a show that you're loading in every day. Nobody wants to do that.
And now the reality is you just got to plug an Ethernet cable into your switch and boom, you're online, and anywhere in the world can tap in. I mean, hell, at this point, guys are walking around with iPhones in their pocket with AirPods in their ears, and they're able to come into people, to come into shows and come into other things.
Right.
So
that's how far the technology has gone.
The technology has gotten, and
it's usable.
It's usable, and the fact that we're dealing with it means there's somebody else in an even higher tech situation that's doing even cooler stuff that's eventually going to bleed down.
That's crazy. I mean, we're running up on the kind of the end of this, and I kind of want to wrap up with. Kenny, do you want to hit anything in between that? Or can I go into my last question?
Yeah, I'll do all my normal end of the show things after that.
Cool, let's do that. So I know you mentioned LDI.
Yeah.
What do you see anything as far as like future or anything that's coming up in technology? With lighting and all that, that's kind of caught your attention less because you guys were there a couple months ago, right?
Yeah, we went to this last show in tail end of 23 in December, and to see where the tech has gone, I'll openly say this: we didn't see any tech that was like, holy crap.
Okay.
Like it's industry's changing in my perspective. What I do see is this shift away. There's been this big push over the last 3-4 years into IP rated fixtures, IP65, outdoor. You can submerge it. It can be in a snowstorm. It can live outside. We saw a lot of that over the last 3 to 5 years. There's been that need, that want, because that's been one of the biggest repair things that as a company we've dealt with is gear being out in a rainstorm or whatever, getting drenched. And electronics don't really like water. It just doesn't.
True.
Different now. So now there was that big push for IP65 everything, this everything. Now it's going into this. It's taken a step back. And they're not like, oh, hey, you're not going to put it underwater. We don't need to like secure it so heavily. So what I'm seeing the shift in and what I'm excited about is the fact that we're making stuff that can basically be outside, but it doesn't have to be this crazy level of secured technology or this casing that you can't deal with.
It's a lot thinner, a lot more flexible.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, the other big changes, of course, are LED technology. I mean, the LED chips and the drivers are changing on a daggum near daily basis.
Right.
So those engines that are powering those lights and powering the LED walls are getting smaller and more powerful and tighter pitches. And so, I mean, I'm excited to where like this year, in my opinion, was kind of a transitional year.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of expecting to see a lot more tech push in this next cycle, like next year. I anticipate some of the stuff we saw in some of the private rooms. I feel like is like the precursor to what's coming, and a little bit of, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, a bit of a new generation of.
Yeah, I think the thought process is changing a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm curious to see how AI fits into this. I'm sure it's going to go ahead and somehow make its way into somehow influencing that technology.
I'm sure at some point. I mean,
at some point it'll do
it. It does with everything.
Right, exactly. Kenny, any last words?
I don't think so. Again, thanks for listening. If there's, to the 5 of you, according to Justin Kitcheman, the 5 of you that are listening, are watching, if there's anything you guys want to see, hear, any questions that we're not asking that you guys want us to ask, shoot it in the comments. Let us know. Again, I think we got some stuff lined up that's pretty cool for the rest of the year.
Fantastic stuff. Fantastic content
coming in. I'm excited about that. I'm excited to start the new year off well.
Yes.
And I don't know if I said this in the last one. I hope everybody had a great holiday.
You didn't, but now
so
now they will.
Yeah,
now they will have, and think about it.
Hopefully they see this before February, but
they will. They will.
If not, happy Valentine's, and Cannonball's 10-year anniversary. No, I think that's it.
Oh, that's right. 10-year anniversary this year, right?
Yep.
Awesome.
But I think from our first podcast, I think we're actually doing pretty well. I think we're on track. We're gonna beat the top 3%.
1,000%. I feel like now we're actually getting into the groove of things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's now coming in a little bit more.
Thing.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, definitely, man. And Jason, a.k.a. Cannonball. It feels weird even calling you Jason.
Yeah.
Cannonball, thank you for – I know, right? Thank you for coming in and helping us out. And, guys, thank you for watching. And Tourmageddon, stay tuned. Until next time, thank you.